So we first discussed the takeaways again from our tours yesterday. So we want to emulate some of those things that we learned about, like wrapping social services around a school in a low-income neighborhood, being a center of gravity for the community, creating a village-like feel, using a depth of resources and mentorship opportunities, team learning, and helping students learn how to be their best selves, students and teachers, peer-to-peer learning, a sense of family in the school, both in how the program is laid out for delivering education and how the spaces would support that. Real-world experiences like RISE, taking the kids out of this community on 150 field trips, because I know in this community, sometimes there are kids that haven't even been to the beach and we're in Los Angeles. Maximizing the use of space, so we know they had to shoehorn a school into a a warehouse, but it was amazing to see how they made the most of every square inch. So even if we were able to do an adaptive reuse of a bigger building or a ground up building, we would keep that same mentality of not wasting space and really making the most of it. We like DaVinci's concept of counseling on all the floors, because that makes counseling more fluid instead of it just being in the admin where it traditionally is. And not just peer-to-peer learning, but we want to do a K through 12, actually a birth through 12, so infant through 12. So we want this village feel where we have the older kids mentoring the younger kids. Really, the village feels a strong concept. And the takeaways included what we didn't see. We didn't see enough outdoor learning spaces, and we don't mean just outdoor play, but not enough outdoor play and not enough outdoor learning. And we didn't see enough spaces for teachers to collaborate. And we feel like teachers are really at the heart of making all this work, because it's more complex to facilitate different styles of learning simultaneously, right? They're not all in lecture mode. So then common experiences, we took that to mean like what have we seen or what projects have we worked on. So we wanted to see basically in a nutshell that this school would recognize that each human being is different and personalize learning and have spaces where they can learn in different styles simultaneously. They don't all have to be doing the same activity at the same time. That would require enhanced acoustics, lighting that isn't factory-like to go back to the warm, intimate, home-like environment. All the systems in the building being exposed so the school itself works as a 3D textbook. Transparency so that teachers could give students more empowerment so they could take charge of their learning, not feeling like they have to be in a classroom box, but they could go out beyond and the teacher could still see them and let them do other learning activities. Spaces for parenting classes, teacher collaboration workroom, so that would have 3 zones, like a zone where they're working and they're modeling collaboration and working for their students and they can see out to the students. A more private area that's more of a lounge, a place of respite, a place to recharge, and then a more collaborative area when they're coming together, not working independently or not in the place of respite zone, but coming together and working. Career tech programs we thought would be very important. Wanting the learning that is taking place in the building to be, or buildings to be explicit. So having those artifacts that are produced in the classes, especially when it's something that's 3D, having that be on display so peers can inspire each other. And following that idea of making the most of every space, having spaces that can do double duty. So for example, like an outdoor space, it could be used for science, wet, messy, project-based, but it could also be used for yoga. So we also thought we should have strong STEM programs, CTE that would have engineering, arts, technology, technical arts, like all the things related to careers in Los Angeles. And then in the parent university space, like space where they could get their GED or do parenting skills or learn more about wellness, like yoga and meditation, things like that. So I guess what problems brought you in as a designer? So it's an underserved community. That's like the overarching problem. families not involved enough, families not understanding how the school system works or any systems that we have in the US, and not trusting, fearing immigration laws, early childhood issues. We know that the cycle of poverty continues if kids aren't able to go to pre-K, they just are thrown into kinder, especially in an institutional environment. That can be very difficult, and they're not off to a good start. So that was a big reason Marilyn came up with the idea that we should find a way to do birth through 12. Scheduling would be staggered so that we could accommodate different schedules of parents that have more than 2 jobs, kids that maybe are involved in something that makes it necessary for the schedule to not be the traditional school schedule. And the other problem was a lack of teacher collaboration. So to make all this happen, we need the teachers to be able to communicate. We also had this problem that we need to break some public school laws to be able to do what we want. So we want to do a public school. So in our movie, we're going to go to court and we're going to fight some of these rules.
And we'll win.
Yeah, like things
our
like
story.
I think like our scheduling idea would be hard in a public school.
Yeah.
Tom Duffy brought up the eating anytime you want, snacks being served would be hard in a public school. So all those little things that seem obvious to us that would be part of our concept, we're going to go to court and
Sounds
fight
like a
it.
Grisham novel.
Yeah.
Denzel Washington was there.
Yeah.
So the other problems that we don't have enough social and emotional support for a fragile population. And a high amount of our population is predicted to drop out or go to jail, not succeed, have a shorter lifespan. So those are our problems. And so the way we engage them is we started out by going out to the community, ringing doorbells, putting up flyers, inviting them to workshops, saying, hey, we're going to start this great school in your community and we want to hear your ideas and share our ideas with you. So at those workshops, we're planning on sharing case studies of other schools around the world that are not traditional to show them this new model and explain why we believe this is a good model. We would ask a lot of questions, especially related to having a school, like the topic of cultural responsiveness, like we want the space to reflect their culture. So this community is primarily Latino. So we would have a whole, it would be a series of workshops. We wouldn't do it in one evening. And we would offer food, like draw as many people as we can. So basically we're just gonna try to draw out their wishes, their needs, their fears in a high level abstract way without showing them any design first. Then we would go back and take those ideas and come back and show them at a very schematic level and get their input again. So that would be our process. And we also planned on taking them on school tours so they could actually visit. And the people that we're inviting are the families, the parents and the kids and the potential teachers, also local businesses, because we want to see what they might be able to donate, whether it's money or mentorship opportunities or both. Resources, yeah. And we also would invite the local government to see what we might be able to do with joint use, like if there were any parks or libraries nearby, how we might be able to work with them.
So one of the things that we talked about was space in a big city like Los Angeles, and to incorporate the community. How do we do that? This is a pie in the sky because we tried to look for a building that was actually this way, but Sears and some of these large box spaces are now shutting down and they're becoming empty within communities. So to create something that is already established as far as this huge parking lot, these huge amount of spaces, if we could create something that takes the Sears building, or half the mall, and creates a school on one side and starts to adapt and bring these resources into the mall in a sense, that allows for other entities of social services that we talked about to be created in those. You now can take half of the space that used to be parking lot, create that into grass areas and communal areas. You've got the center area that can be utilized as a community center in a sense, but now you're drawing the whole community that's wrapped around your school, which is how, all of us raising our children, how many times did you become friends of the friends that were around the school? So I think that drawing the community around that center, and there's the ways to divide that, because that was a big concern that we had. How do you separate the public from the communal stuff that's going on? And you can do that. I mean, you can separate it so it's in the same area, but they're not coming into the school for security reasons, obviously. The other thing that we talked about in having something of that nature is, again, the cost of taking over a space, but getting the community, the mayor and other people who have this spot that's now dead, and it's bringing down the community and revitalizing that so it becomes a center again. So that's one thing that we really thought, trying to repurpose existing buildings, because we saw how difficult it is, and they're having one building here, one building there. We don't want our children walking around and going to different places. So revitalizing old places and creating a place that becomes natural, that the library is next to the school, that's next to the resources that we wanted. And I'll let the others talk about even creating that communal garden. So if the kids are planting and watering and everything else, the parents, if we can't feed our kids the table, they can most certainly take it home. The parents, if they're doing the gardening there, they can take it home. So we'll talk about just how do we do that, but I'll let these two talk about the design within to create the resources that we wanted.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about like a STEM use or CTE, so the learning model would be very practical and useful for the kids, and the kids are producing not necessarily based by grade or by age, but by their mastery of the materials, but very useful for the community, so they're learning but giving back to the community at all times, but also using the community. So there's a lot of partnerships with businesses for entrepreneurship or things based on that basis. And real fluid pedagogy within the building, and the building is used very fluid-like, so it's a lot of movement, inside, outside, bringing the outside in, inside out. So it's just a real natural part of the community. But you can talk about the design of it.
So basically, we talked a couple times about the flexible schedule, and we've also talked about STEM, project-based learning, collaborative learning, and at some level, those two things don't go together, because obviously you have to have the same people at the same time in the room to have collaborative learning and project-based learning. So what we talked about was a model that perhaps had the first hour and the last hour of the day would be scheduled, that kids could come either that first or last hour and have that flexibility. And then we'd have some core hours in the middle. And during those core hours is when you could set up your STEM, your CTE, and the things like that where the kids could all work together. We also thought that the multi-use space, we talked about that a lot. For example, we don't think necessarily the cafeteria should be only a cafeteria. What other ways can we bring that in there? As Michael pointed out this morning, there's a big sign that says if you're hungry during the day, just tell us and you can go get food. So how could we enhance that also? So we talked about setting up some more restaurant booths, some cafe bistro type tables, and even putting in some printers and maybe even some public computers and things like that in there that would invite kids to come in. And if they had to print something, they could come in during lunch, they could work on the computer, they could print out their information, and then that would give you a lot more use of that space during the day as well. And as Kathleen pointed out, what we talked about is we really felt that the public part of that, being able to have the community come in and be a part of that, was really important. So we would see a central design where there was the grand entry, if you will, where you could display student art, where you could have a lot of the things that the public, you could have the counseling services, the legal services, all of the things they talked about to help the families, maybe even some nutritional services and things like that. That could be right up front. We thought it would be really cool to have the arts right attached to that so that you could probably see the recording studio. So the public, that's a little more tangible than watching kids learn about math or spelling or reading. So we thought we'd have the arts things right off that, where you'd have the performing arts, the guitar, the piano, the recording studio, something that would show that creative side of thing as well. So we would do that. We also want it to be really community and environmentally friendly. We talked about things like a rooftop garden where you could have additional growing spaces up there. We'd really like to see a part of it be solar powered so that that could actually be part of the study curriculum and also something that could give back to the community and could do that. And we even talked about collecting rainwater. You know, you could use that for a science experiment of how much did it rain and how much did we collect, and if you have, you know, 10 downspouts in this big tank, how much is going to go in there, and use that to water the plants and use that for some of the other things that you could, you know, that would help sustain life there. And we think that those practical things would give the people, the students and the community a better sense of connection with their environment, a connection with how you do that. And you know, the whole idea that we talked about was really a family or a village or people working together and making sure that we kept all of the different groups working together. We talked a lot about how can older students mentor younger students. Obviously, you're going to need spaces for that. They're going to have to be really visible, right? You're going to have glass windows and a lot of visibility. You're going to have it somewhere where they can get together without crossing over any imaginary or real boundaries that the laws would have, and we didn't have time to get into all that. But to us, the main thing was to build on that community, to make sure that the people were helping people, to make sure that not only the students but the community and the parents felt like it was a safe place to come, because you know, as we saw in our earlier SOS documentation, a lot of those parents have never graduated. They really don't understand what's involved in schooling. How can they support it? How can they help if they don't have that understanding? And the more we can do to help encourage them to come in and understand what their kids are getting and make it a positive experience, we think that's the better it will be. And like Kathleen said, then we could, I think, if I got that we could also have the GED programs at night, because once the parents see that school's not a scary thing, maybe they'll want to come back and get their GEDs and further their education as well. So that was our vision behind that.
Called it Parent University.